Think about your actions as the middle of a sandwich. Meat, veggies, both, whatever we want to go in the middle of our sandwich, we don't want it to be wimpy. We want it to be robust. That's the reason why we're eating the sandwich. And I have used this analogy for years when talking about answering behavioral questions. Most answers, the actions are too lean. And because they're too lean, I don't get a great visual of you, what you did, and specifically how you did it. I have done a ton of content on behavioral answers and how to break down these answers. But in the actions, I don't know that I've gone in depth enough. So let's absolutely deep dive today. Let's have some fun. And I'm going to show you how to create fantastic behavioral answers, and specifically by focusing in on just the actions. So, our actions, 2 to 3 minutes. People might disagree with this length of time. They may say it's way too long, this is crazy, but the reality is anything less, and I simply am not going to understand what you did and how you did it. We got to go in depth in our actions. It's going to create great visuals for our audience. And what is the goal of a behavioral answer? It's very simplistic. The goal is past performance predicts future performance, and the performance piece is all in our actions. So let's deep dive. So where do we start? Well, here's the beauty. Almost all behavioral answers are going to start in the same place. We almost always start by looking at some initial research, diving deep into the data and analytics, doing some planning, and doing that all in collaboration and coordination with key stakeholders. So now let's get into, well, how are you going to go about this? So as you think through your best examples, start with, what did I do first? What was the information that I needed to uncover in order to move forward? Did I need to create a one-pager, a presentation, just a general Q&A session with my colleagues to make sure that we were diving deep into the data? So we always start with that initial kind of kickoff of how are we looking at the information? Then we want to really start to think about, well, in correlation with that data, how did we come up with the plan? And if we started to do that planning before we spoke with anybody, we want to introduce that first. But oftentimes we look at the data, then we're going to have some conversations, and then we're going to do the planning. And now here's a sneaky trick. If you can't remember all the details, you can always go back and ask ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or Llama or whatever your preferred Gen AI tool is to say, typically when planning for a customer engagement, what are some of the items you think I might have considered? And it might jog your memory to actual steps you took. You're going to want to utilize AI tools throughout to jog your memory, but really sit and think through it. I want to know how you look at data. Do you look at the legacy systems you're utilizing? Do you like to run reports? Do you like to create dashboards? Get into the weeds. This is all the how. And of course, we are going to stay as concise as possible, but just getting this data into a Google Doc is going to be a great starting point. Then after looking at that data, when we talk about conversations, how do you have conversations? Do you like to do in-person Q&A sessions or Q&A sessions via video? Do you like to come in with a simple one-pager and talk through it? How do you talk about planning and best next steps? This is going to really make me get a feel for you and how you interact with your colleagues, with external stakeholders. It's just giving me a sense of how you go about doing these initial stages, these initial items. And remember, sometimes these initial actions will include internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, or both. But really get into thinking about how you do it. And I don't think I've ever deep dove as much in this section, but just the steps and again, utilizing AI to get us through it. Next is execution and testing. So let's talk a little bit about execution and testing. Testing feels very software engineering driven, right? Software engineers are going to test and then they're going to make sure that everything works and then they're going to execute. But we're testing a lot more than we think we are in general, meaning we might just do a sample or a subset, or we might do a trial of some sort. It's pretty common. So I don't want you to forget about, well, what did you try first? Did you do this initial little trial just to make sure that everything was aligned? That's going to be really important for your interviewer because they care to know that you're just not going to execute on a full plan without having really thought through it and potentially tested it. We even test in the conflict question. Maybe we had a conflict with a coworker and maybe we tested out doing or having interactions with them one-on-one, or we tested implementing one strategy with them. Testing is it's just more common than we think it is. And so it's definitely something that I want you to be thinking through and diving deep into in your actions. Then what is the biggest missing piece of the puzzle when it comes to behavioral answers? They're front loaded. What the heck do I mean by front loaded? What I mean is a lot of times we're focusing the majority of our answer on what we did initially, and then we're just saying, hey, it worked out. I need to know how you executed because that's usually the longest period of time. So what did you do to execute? Did you conduct daily stand-up meetings? Did you have weekly check-ins? Did you create dashboards? Did you constantly and continuously monitor as you were executing? Get into the execution phases. Why is that so important? Because then they're envisioning how you would execute on a project, program, or initiative for them. So really do not back away from the execution details. Again, it is definitely the biggest missing piece of the puzzle. And again, before we execute, we'll usually test or sample or do something first. Then what's that last step? Well, it's presenting, launching, and documenting. Sometimes we do all three. Sometimes we just do one of these items. So of course, if it's a big project, program, or initiative, we may have a launch where the testing and execution is actually about launching a product, a feature, etc. It could be an internal launch, whatever it might be. So we may want to talk about how we actually got to that formal launch. Presenting is very common. Your ability and demonstrating strong presentation skills is going to be something that is critical when interviewers are thinking about you joining the company. So just saying we presented the results, it's not enough. We presented the results by creating a 3-page slide deck. We saved 15 minutes for Q&A. We identified best next steps, etc. Whatever it might be, dive into that how. There's not a lot of corporate jobs where you won't have to present information. Then lastly is documentation. This is a little bit of what I like to call a legacy item. How did you document so that future initiatives or projects or programs were successful? So how did you go about documenting it? Did you share it with an online resource, etc.? Documentation shows that, again, it's a legacy item. Once you leave the company, you have set the company up for better future success because you've documented a critical process or strategy that anybody can tap into. I know this feels like a lot, but this is the level of depth that I look for in behavioral answers. And when you can dive in and chronologically walk me through the steps. Now, sometimes things are happening at the same time, of course, but deep dive, walk me through each item And of course, we're going to work to keep it concise. Your total behavioral answers should be about 3 to 4 minutes, with the actions being about 2 to 3 minutes. Go to practiceinterviews.com. Go scroll to the bottom of our website, click the free resources button, and you can get this template and start building out your answers. Having a plan and strategy for your behavioral answers is critical because, again, they are the most common type of question asked in all interviews at all companies across the globe. I really hope this deep dive into actions helps. Thanks.